everyone, Kelly here, and I'd like to talk about the 25 books I want to read in 2025. So last year I had made too many goals. So I had made 2 videos where I talked about 24 books I want to read in 2024 and then 24 series books, like books from series that I want to read in 2024. And I didn't do a great job. I actually read 5 books from each of those lists, which, I don't know how I ended up with the exact same amount, but 5 books from each of those lists. But what I did notice, because I was going to just not even do a books to read in 2025 video, but what I did notice was that throughout the year, when I would come to a point where I'm like, I need something to read, and I didn't have like a specific mood necessarily or know what I wanted to read, I would go to those lists, but what I would end up doing is I have a place on my phone where I have those challenge lists, and then I have like lists of like books I have bought, like my book haul is right below that. I found myself leaning towards reading the books that I had bought recently, like in the last year. So last year would have been like books from 2023 or whatever. So I found myself doing that more and kind of picking those books over my list of books that I picked. And so I thought maybe instead of just arbitrarily picking 25 books off my shelf, because that doesn't seem to really go with what I am like in the mood for in the moment, I should just like make my 25 books that I read this year be the books that I bought in 2024, since it seems like I am wanting to read the things that I've read more recently, which also goes with the fact that I've been trying the last couple years to buy less books, really read the books that I buy. So if I could just like read all the books I bought in 2024, that'd be great. And so I was counting them up, and when I was counting and I'd taken out like the crafting books and the like devotional books, I had 26 books, and I was like, oh, I have to take one out. But then I ended up just like making myself read it in the last 2 days of 2024. So now I have 25 books that I bought last year that I want to have on my list. So here's this list. So these are all books that I bought recently, so I should still be interested in, and I am. Like when I was pulling them off my shelf, I am interested in all these books. So I ended up pulling them out in categories because I also wanted to kind of see what categories, what genres, what types of books am I leaning towards. It was definitely predominantly fantasy. So I separated my fantasy into kind of different sections. So first off are fantasies that are authors that, well, let me start out with the one that doesn't really fit into a category, and this is just a retelling, which is why I picked it up. And this is Thistlefoot by Jenna Rose Nethercott. This is a retelling of the Baba Yaga story, and I wanted to read some books this year that were retellings of different like fairy tales or folklore kind of things, and so that's why I picked that one up. And then so I had originally a category of ones that are just like standalones, not in a series, but then it turns out the rest of these standalones are all like I bought them because I've read other things from this author and I love them. So these are all authors I've read from previously, those next few. I have The Nature of Witches by Rachel Griffin. I had read her other book, which last time I talked about this in my book haul, I can't remember what the other book is, and once again, I can't remember what it was. But I really enjoyed it, so I thought I would pick up, this is her like either debut or her first like kind of this type of book, witchy, young adult, fantasy. So I want to read that one this year. And then I have a T. Kingfisher book because I basically read everything by T. Kingfisher and own most of her books. This is A Sorceress Comes to Call, and this was a retelling of The Goose Girl, which is another kind of retelling that I want to read several Goose Girl retellings this year. So I had picked that one up. And then I have The Maid and the Crocodile by Jordan Ifueko. I had read her Raybearer duology and loved it. So when I saw she had another book coming out in 2024, I picked it up immediately. This, from what I can tell, takes place in that world, the same world as the Raybearer, but it's like their own characters and a standalone. So it's not like related to the series, just takes place in that world. And then I have Atalanta by Jennifer Saint. And this is the book that came out, I think it came out in 2023. And so I picked that one up, and is following Atalanta from Greek mythology. And as I'm talking about this, I'm realizing I also bought Hera in 2024, and I did not put that on this list. I must have forgotten. So technically I have 26 books that I had bought in 2024 that I should read. But since there are 2 from the same author, I'm just going to like put this one on the list officially if I read Hera, that'll be bonus points. But yeah, that's the end of the ones that are like standalones. Next, I have a bunch of like firsts in series that I bought because I just can't help myself. I keep like saying I want to like buy new series and start new series, and then they sit on my shelf for a long time. So this year I really like to start these series since these are the ones I bought in 2024. I have The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. I've heard great things about Tasha Suri, and this series just finished. Like the third one came out in 2024, and even though it's big, this is actually written very large font. It almost feels like a large print book, so I don't think it's actually as long as it feels like from looking at the side of it. So I would like to start that one. And then I have An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir. This is one of my most recent purchases. I love these newer covers they have, and I just heard several people this year reading this series for the first time, even though it's been out for a while, and so kind of like renewed the series for me and makes me want to pick it up. And then I have Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. And if I do read this, she has a third book in this series coming out in 2025. So that'd be fun if I like this and pick up the second book. And then the third one I think is like Tales from this world. So if I read that, then it's like an ongoing series. Then I had Bloodleaf by Crystal Smith, and this was another Goose Girl retelling, which is why I had picked up this one, and it's a duology. I am like nowadays liking duologies, so that's good that this one is a little shorter series to read. And then another Goose Girl retelling, I bought Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. I think this one's a trilogy, and I think that the third one is coming out this year in 2025. So if I like this, that will be a series that I can complete, as long as it's only gonna be a trilogy, hopefully. And then another duology, I bought Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I know almost everybody has read the series already, and I really just wasn't interested in it because I had DNF the Shadow and Bone series. I made like 1.5 books in that, and it just wasn't for me. But I've heard that people like the Six of Crows sometimes better than that. And then when I watched the show, I did really enjoy the Shadow and Bone show, and the reason I loved it was because of the crows. So I do want to read this duology, so I picked that one up. And then my last kind of like fantasy, I do have fantasy middle grade, but my last like kind of more adult fantasy are continuations and series. So I picked up the final in this duology, Hearts That Cut by Kiki Hatsupulo. And I had read the first one in the summer, I think. It's Threads That Bind was the first book in the series. Really enjoyed it. It's like Greek myth retelling with the fates, like the main characters are the fates. And I really liked that one, and I want to continue that series and finish it up since it's a duology. And then I have 10,000 Stitches by Olivia Atwater, and this is like historical romance fantasy. And I read Half a Soul just like a month ago and wanted to continue, and I've actually already started it. I started it on like January 2nd, and so definitely moving along. I've actually like started a few books and finished a few books so far, or a couple books so far this year, which the ones I finished are coming up later. Yeah, none of the ones I've shown so far, except for this one is one I have started. So I'm already like on a roll on these books. And then while we're talking about fantasy, I'll talk about my middle grade fantasy. I separated them out just so that I would look like I'm diversifying my reading, even though I just read a lot of fantasy. So I have Illuminations by T. Kingfisher. This is one of her middle grade books that is fantasy with magic, and it focuses on art, as you could tell from the painting. And then I have The Way Past Winter by Kieran Millwood Hargrave, and I have never tried one of her like regular middle grades. I've read a couple of hers that are like highly illustrated contemporary, but I've never read any of her middle grade fantasy, which I believe this is a fantasy story. I mean, I might be wrong about that, but yeah, it just looks like the perfect book to read pretty soon. I think I might even try to read this in January because it does have that winter vibe while it's still like snowy out. I have Amber and Clay by Laura Amy Schlitz, and I actually don't know, this is mythology, so I think mythology is categorized as fantasy, but I think it's also mostly historical, maybe some historical mythology type of thing. This is taking place, I think, is it Rome or ancient? I don't know if it's ancient Greece or ancient Rome, but it's like at ancient times, and it's following two different characters, and I think part of it is written in verse and part of it is written in prose. Yeah, so one character character's perspective is in like verse and the other one is just in regular prose. So excited for that one. And then the first book that I bought, I think I bought this like January 2nd of 2024 and I still hadn't read it, is Alebrijes by Dana Barbara Higuera. And I'm really wanting to read this because I loved The Last Quintista, which is why when I saw this in the bookstore, I picked it up immediately. It's such a beautiful cover. Definitely want to pick this one up this year. And it's kind of like a, I think maybe this is more sci-fi than fantasy. I think it's more like dystopian, but however you want to call that. And then the last one in middle grade is The Forest of a Thousand Eyes by Frances Harding and illustrations by Emily Gravett. And this is one that I've already finished. I just finished it yesterday. And this is like a novella, kind of more of like a fable type of thing that's highly illustrated. So already got one checked off the list. And then I had one sci-fi that I had purchased in 2024, and that's The Sparrowman by Mary Robinette Kowal. And this is like a murder mystery in space. And so I am definitely excited to read this one. And then I have a series of short stories, which is like a classic. I have The Breaking Point by Daphne du Maurier. Her short stories are a little unsettling, maybe not fully horror, maybe more gothic, but I really enjoy her short stories. So that one is on my list for the year. And then I have one poetry collection. I have Counting Descent by Clint Smith. I really loved his other poetry collection, and I think I'm going to read this month in January as well, because I read his last poetry collection last January. So it would be kind of nice if he continues to write poetry collections, maybe I can read them every January. If not, I'll just read some type of poetry in January, but I definitely want to read that. And then we're on to my last section, which is nonfiction. And so first I have Divine Might by Natalie Haynes, and this is a collection of like essays about goddesses and Greek myth. And I really enjoyed her other collection of essays about mythology that were just about women in myths, and this is specifically goddesses in myth. And then I have The Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I really loved Braiding Sweetgrass, so I want to read this. I'm also hoping to read this in January, so that would be another one off of this goal if I read that in the next couple weeks. A book that I'm in the middle of, I'm already 40% of the way through this, is Unraveling by Peggy Orenstein, and this is her story of during the pandemic learning how to shear sheep and do the whole process. Like, she was already a knitter, but she wanted to do the whole process from beginning to end, and so that's what this book is about, kind of going back to a time when we would like do every part of a craft. And then the last one is How Far the Light Reaches, A Life in 10 Sea Creatures by Sabrina Embler. And this one I also have already read. So I finished 2 books and I'm in the middle of 2 books off this list already. So I am like killing it in January. This is a memoir that also has a lot of like science, like marine science put into it as well. So those are the 25 books that I want to read in 2025. As I said, there'll be a bonus one too if I read Hera. So I think I'm going to be doing good, because maybe I'm just being optimistic because I'm already starting strong by finishing 2 5 days into the month, and already like partway into 2 more. So maybe I'm, putting myself up too high because I've started off so well, but doesn't everyone start off well in January? But I feel good because I'm picking books that I really wanted recently. By all these being ones I've bought in the last year, I'm still interested in them. I think my problem before was when I would just pick books and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to be interested in this. And maybe I was just interested in it in that moment, but it wasn't like a long lasting interest or something that would come up every month, where I'm hoping that because I bought these recently, they will continue to be ones that I want to pick up right away, that I had that interest like peaked soon. So let me know if any of these are on your list, if you enjoyed any of these books, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.